Okay, hi. Here I am, as promised, with this discussion of it is that I like walking so much. Um, Now, I probably won't be looking at the camera very much because I'm going to be working from a text over here. Let me just see if I can drag it out to the middle so it hides my stupid face from me. And so that it's sort of at least more central, so I'm not distractingly looking off to one side. So you may have noticed, if you follow me on social media or on SoundCloud, that I do a lot of long walks. Particularly since July, I've taken a number of long walks and some shorter walks, and done then recorded accounts of those walks. I've also, on Facebook at least, posted photos of those from those walks. And there will be more of that in the new year, and I want to develop that further. Um, I'm not quite sure how. I'm thinking about uh, perhaps building a book from that. Other ideas. It's all very unformed at present. So let's get into the actual essay. So going back to the beginning, I've walked all my life since I was able to actually walk. And that was especially the case when my parents moved to the countryside. That was at the age of 9, and the Three Peaks, and there were other hills right on our doorstep. We were below a hill that was essentially a foothill of Ingleborough. And there was a smaller hill opposite, which was also very interesting. And then things like Mooton over on one side, and then you could get out to Malham. It was a very rich environment for walking and that sort of thing. But even prior to moving, I remember my parents taking us on holiday to places in North Yorkshire, to places in Cumbria, even to one year to Norwich. And when my father was studying as a priest in Oxford, we also walked there. So there was a lot of walking, and I remember certainly one of my siblings being relatively unwilling to walk, whereas I rather enjoyed it, probably because I was a fairly compliant child. So it's always been a part of my life. Now, more recently, in 2015, I planned and completed an 80-kilometre walk around the outside of the M60, which is Manchester's orbital motorway. And the walk should have been, or could have been, a little longer, but I didn't really have time or opportunity to plan a complete circuit around the outside. At one stage on the western side, I had to come inside the motorway at around the Trafford Centre and then go back outside at around Worsley. Now, I could have diverted that, but it is actually an extremely lengthy diversion that would have probably added maybe 3 hours or more onto the total time of the walk. And given that it took longer than I expected and was very nearly 16 hours, it would have extended the walk considerably. In 2015, that would have been a bit of a stretch. I don't know if I would have been capable of doing that length. Now I'm pretty confident that I could. So I may revisit that walk again. So having completed that, I began to increase the number of walks in the range of around 30 to 50 kilometers that I take. That's things between about 6 and about 10 hours walking, because my walking speed averages at about 5 kilometers an hour. That's roughly 3 miles an hour. So 2017, last year, I started writing notes with the intention of recording accounts of these long walks, although I didn't start recording them at that time. Now, the intention was that I was, as I'm doing here, going to use YouTube. What I was actually going to do was prepare videos, not do them live, edit them and upload them. But my computer was getting old. I also didn't have very much storage on it, so it wasn't particularly technically feasible. What I could have done, and what I began to do this year in about July, was I could use SoundCloud to do sort of a more podcast style account of the walk. Now, the accounts that I wrote in 2017, two of those I have recorded this year. The first of those is really a bit of a mess because the writing that I was doing in 2017 was much drier. It was sort of times and directions so that people could follow it and do the walk themselves. That really isn't a very sensible or feasible option, and it makes for a very dull bit of writing. The second of the accounts that I recorded, I had to essentially rewrite it, and that's a lengthy process. That's why I haven't done any more of 2017's walks, although I may still revisit them at some point in future. So July this year, I decided to start and to write and then record the accounts of a walk, and I've continued to do so since then. I've done more than 30, I think more than 32 walks this year, and I'm hoping that I'll get another one in tomorrow, although I'm out tonight, so that might put a bit of a dent in that. But by September this year, 2018, I was starting to think about exploring why it is that I enjoy walking so much. You know, not just for myself, but to put out an explanation. And in mid-October, while I was actually on a walk, I started to write a series of bullet points with the intention of expanding on them. And then I got distracted by other things, which is entirely natural for me. Some of those were real life things, you know, good real life things, spending time with friends, spending time with family, that sort of thing. But finally, just before we got to Christmas, I decided to revisit the text, which is what I'm reading here. Now, so I've now got that text, and it's not in really any particular order, but there are around 12 items here. 12 items is entirely coincidental. I'm not trying to make reference to anything, particularly not to little proto-fascist Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Living. You can ignore that. This is just the reasons that occurred to me why it is I enjoy walking. So the first one of those is simply that I enjoy it. It's pleasurable, and there's no further need for any expansion. And it's like any pastime, anything that's been there sort of as long as we can remember. Logical justifications are really just they're a kind of post hoc rationalization. They follow on from the initial attraction to that. Now, whether that attraction comes out through kind of indoctrination, I already mentioned that my parents walked a lot, that we moved to the countryside, so it is something that was always there. So that might be part of the reason, but on the other hand, other parts of my parents' beliefs I haven't carried through. So I don't know. But yeah, I don't go through a list of reasons why I enjoy walking before I go out for a walk. It's simply a compulsion. It's also the way that I explore any new place, particularly when I visit a new city or a city that I don't know too well, or somewhere that I only visit occasionally. I will wander out if I've got time and get lost, and then find my way back and then get lost again. And that's a wonderful thing, and I'm sure it probably comes up in one of the later reasons. So the second of these 12 reasons is for general fitness. Now, it isn't an especially high impact exercise to go walking, even if I'm routinely walking between 6 or more likely 7 hours and 10 hours. But it is better than nothing, and it certainly seems to help my stamina and my ability to continue walking for a long time. It helps with my sciatica, although most of the time that's not present. It's only very occasionally, usually if I've been spending too much time sat in badly designed car seats on difficult roads. And in concert with my sort of vocal sound making and singing, it helps my lung capacity and breath control. And I do combine it with other exercise, although I've been a little slack over the last few months. But that's been a matter of finding time, which is, it's like anybody organizing things. It's also a little bit of my autism. Once there's changes in my life, it's finding a new rhythm and fitting in everything that I want to do. But that's really by the way. Now, one of the slight problems that I have had with, I guess, broadly under the heading of fitness this year, was because the boots that I had weren't that great. I was getting pains in my left heel, and to a lesser extent in the sole of my right foot and sometimes my left foot. But having gone out and spent a fairly considerable amount on a decent pair of walking shoes, which I tried on, I walked about the shop in them, tried standing on slopes. The pair of boots that I've got now give me no problems at all. In fact, I don't need to think about my feet or the condition of my feet at all during longer walks. So third, I said this would come up again. Getting to know the place you're in better, and also realizing how little you actually know. Also seeing new places to come back to and spend more time in, or see, or have ideas for new walks, or getting to know new places. And it's good, I think, in any circumstance, to realize that you know less than you think. I don't know about others, but I certainly tend to fudge and blur my areas of ignorance, and even to outright ignore them as far as I can. And it can be shocking to try and examine something you think you know, to pin down exactly what it is that you do know, and to realize through that you know much less than you think. And that's healthy. I mean, for me, certainly it stops me, or at least reduces the instances of me imagining that I'm more knowledgeable and smarter than I actually am. Particularly as a lot of places that I walk through, I don't, again, coming back to the autism, I don't particularly engage with a lot of people. I don't stop and chat. I don't talk. I don't know people who live in these areas. I don't know very much about the history of these places. So there's a sort of element of the physical environment that I know during those times that I walk through it, but I'm very much aware that it has a whole life that I really don't understand at all. And following on from that, the fourth reason why I enjoy walking is the mental map that I have. I have a very clear mental map of places that I know well, and even a relatively sketchy map of places that I've just seen once. And as I walk through new places, adjacent to places that I know, or even more so when I make previously unrealized connection between places I know, I can feel that mental map folding and reconfiguring itself. It is very much like Inception, with buildings folding in on themselves, or opening out, or aligning in strange ways. That mental map very much does that, and it can be almost a physical process that I'm very much aware of. And I think it's something that I may have mentioned in a few of the accounts. When I turn a corner, or it slowly dawns on me that this road is connecting to somewhere that I know, and these two places that I hadn't really associated. So one might be over here on the map, one might be over here on the map, and suddenly actually they're right next to each other, linked by just a little cord. So that mental map is quite exciting to have, and it's exciting to feel it change when it gets new information. So The fifth reason for enjoying walking is that, as well as being relatively mild exercise, it is also relaxing and meditative. Now, this also ties into a couple of the later reasons that I'll talk about, and particularly when I'm on my own walking, it does become a form of meditation. Now, I'm not talking here about the specific thing called walking meditation. That's something very different. It's not really something that I practice. What I'm talking about here is more the ability of the mind to wander, for periodically the sense of self to drop away, and for the perception of time to change. And those things are uh, very much sort of meditative experiences. I don't quite experience the hypnagogic hallucinations that I get quite often while meditating, while I'm walking, or at least not yet anyway. Now, two of those three reasons that I gave them, the mind wandering, sense of self dropping away, and the perception of time shifting, two of those do crop up in their own right on this list, and that starts with six, the mind wandering, having space to think. One of the things that can be very difficult for me generally, and I think this may be related to my autism, is using language. I always aware of a perceptible translation in both understanding what people say to me and me formulating a response to that, and that's why it can sometimes take a long time in conversation, whether that be typing online or speaking to someone on the phone or face to face. So again, when I'm on my own, there's less need for language, and even when I'm making my notes as an account of the walk, the rest of my mind can stray off wherever it will, whether that's emotions, images, sounds, making a set of associations from the sensory data that I'm getting in through my ears and eyes. And I also find it easier, honestly, to think while I'm walking than I do when I'm sat down or standing around. I think my brain seems to work better. I haven't really tested that. I may be completely wrong about it, but that's how it feels to me. I'm not quite sure why it is that my brain is able to kind of wander at the same time as I'm writing my notes of the walk. I think probably it's practice. I've been doing it since the beginning of July from this year, and I did it for a similar period last year in 2017. And it's something that I've done through a lot of my life. A lot of my early writing as a child and a young teenager was purely descriptive. And it was something where I could almost detune my brain. It quite often meant that things needed some severe editing, but it's a skill that I've practiced, so that may be why part of my brain can be doing language stuff and the rest isn't having to worry about that. That said, this kind of format, reading something that's written down, is a little difficult because I can lose track of the actual meaning of the words. I can be reading the text and not having much sense of what any of it means, even though I was very clear at the time when I was writing it. So the seventh reason why I enjoy writing, let me just bring that image back up. text back up rather. Seventh reason why I enjoy writing is surprise and enchantment. Even in familiar places, there are always surprising and new things, and I can't deny that uh, I and I think everybody else gets bored of and becomes blind to something that we're familiar with. So a road you walk down every day, but if you try walking the wrong way down the road or on the wrong side of the road, then you see that it becomes quite different. Now, I think unfamiliarity helps, as does an openness to the accidental. Now, unfamiliarity isn't always available to us. We can't always find a place that we don't know. And an openness to the accidental isn't something that you can cultivate all the time. You can make conditions where it's more likely to arise, but you can't always walk around in that kind of, I guess, kind of hyper alertness happening. You just can't force these things. All you can do is put yourself in situations where these things are more likely to arise. And I realize that for a lot of people, practically going to unfamiliar places can be a challenge. It might be a physical challenge, it might be a mental challenge, it might be a financial or resource challenge. I think if you are able to find unfamiliar places as far as you can, then I think that is a good thing to do. But and that will make these these possibilities of surprise and enchantment more likely to arise. But yeah, you really can't force it. Now, an eighth reason why I enjoy walking is mental health. And I don't want to talk too much about this since I'm really the absolute opposite of an expert. But for me, I think long walks are positive for my mental health. And to me, that positive influence derives from the ideas I've already discussed in connection with fitness and with walks being relaxing and meditative, and the preceding one of surprise and enchantment that can arise. I think all of these things spin off from walking, and all of those contribute to mental health. That said, since I've walked long distances all my life, and since I have also encountered mental health problems of depression and anxiety, of self-harm, I'm well aware that walking is neither preventative of mental health problems nor curative of them. It's just one of a number of things that can help, and those things should also include professional help and, in some cases, medication. But I think it is useful, and it is useful for those reasons that I suggested: fitness, relaxing and meditation, surprise and enchantment. It also gets you outside, it gets you out in the sun, sometimes anyway. So yeah, mental health. I think it's a positive influence, but don't expect it to be a miracle. Perception of time, I mentioned earlier. This is the ninth reason. I find that my perception of time shifts in at least two ways. Walks, sort of 9.5, 10 hours or more, don't really feel particularly long. I think because at that length they are so long that you're breaking them down into brief moments. Small moments of surprise and enchantment, like I mentioned recently, they are not just there, but they can slow down and seem to expand. So, for instance, you see a bird fly from a tree and out across the road and then over a field, and that might become a huge moment. There's a lot of detail that you take in. at the same time, the walk uh, of however many hours doesn't feel long, like I said, and it is rare that I feel bored. I seem to have this ability to make a mental adjustment before the walk or as I'm setting out, so that large sections of the walk seem to take less time than they actually do, and occasionally might drop temporarily from memory, irrespective of whether I'm writing notes about them, almost as if it's a blackout or a loss of self. But then when I'm coming to recall the walk, especially if I'm recording one of my accounts and I'm reading through it, they'll be there kind of between the lines, as it were. I've had that experience a few times where I'm reading a description of one thing and then it moves on to another, and I'm aware that there's some other interesting things that I wanted to talk about. There was maybe a cow in a field that was doing something interesting, or there was the way the sky looked, or there was a particular feeling that I had that I haven't noted down because writing is time consuming, so you're trying to write the most key things, but it acts as an aid memoir, and those other small recollections are kind of pinned onto that, and they come back as you're rereading it. So moving from perception of time on to rhythm. This is the 10th reason why I enjoy walking, and there's a lot of different rhythms. There's the rhythms of my footsteps, of my heartbeat, my breathing, of objects as I pass them by. So, for instance, it might be you're walking past a fence and sunlight is strobing through it, or it might be that there are trees at regular intervals, that kind of thing. These are all important to the experience of walking. I enjoy rhythm in walking and other arts, and I know that auditory driving, that is a kind of rhythmic pulse that I think mirrors brainwaves, or that your brainwaves can synchronize with. That can be used to induce trance states. Don't take my description of auditory driving as in any way accurate. Go and search for it yourself, have a read up on the Wikipedia article, and then follow up their links for something that makes actually more sense. 11th reason, I mean, 11 and 12 seem kind of similar, and they sort of relate back to what I said at the start. The first reason, simply enjoying walking. But the 11th reason is necessity. And yeah, it should perhaps be paired with simply enjoying walking. It isn't something that I can rationalize, and again, any justification is after the fact. Again, like I mentioned again previously, it's perhaps because I was brought up that way, and for a long part of my childhood I grew up in the countryside. So walking simply feels like a necessity, but whatever the reasons are, there is a compulsion. If I haven't gone for a walk for a few days, or I haven't got a long walk in for a few days, I want to get out. I want to start covering the ground. I want to make distance. I want to do something. I have to start going, and that's a good way to go about it. And the 12th reason is habit. And so, I mean, given what I said about necessity just a moment ago, habit might simply be another way of expressing the same idea. I think there is a difference, and I think that the difference is that, well, when I was writing this, I thought the difference was that habit is the unconscious drive to walk just because that's what I always do. But that's kind of what I described with necessity. In itself, that habit might fade over time if I didn't have the opportunity to walk for a while. Whereas necessity is the thing that will drive me out of doors to walk, whatever the weather. If I've been longer than a day or two without walking, okay, that makes more sense. So necessity is the absolute compulsion to walk. It's the thing that will force me out of doors, whatever it's like outside. If I haven't had the opportunity to walk. Whereas habit is just the unconscious drive. It's just, I'll walk because that's what I always do. It's a fairly fine distinction, and it's one that I'd forgotten about because I wrote that note a few days ago. But yeah, I think that covers most of it. So yeah, those 12 reasons, just briefly to run through them again. Number one, I enjoy it. Number two, there's an element of fitness. Number three, it's getting to know the place you're in better, whether it's a place that you know already or if it's somewhere new. Um, Fourth is my mental map, and particularly the changes to that mental map as I pass through areas. The fact that it's also relaxing and meditative, and leading on from that, the sixth reason, gives me space to think. Seventh, there is surprise and enchantment available, particularly in unfamiliar places, but it can happen in familiar places too. I think there are also eighth reason benefits for my mental health. Ninth, it shifts my perception of time in different ways. 10, rhythm is a huge component of it. There are a lot of different rhythms layering over each other. 10th, it's a necessity, it's a drive, and second, it's a habit, which, as I say, a habit might well fall off if I didn't have the opportunity to do it, but then necessity would drive me to try and find that opportunity. So I think that's pretty much it. I've gone on for more than half an hour. That's slightly longer than I expected. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. Do you enjoy walking? If you do, what is it that you enjoy about walking? And I'll see you for my next thing, whatever that happens to be and whenever that happens to be. So yeah, bye.